Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you this drawing of Keanu Reeves as John Wick. Let's start. So I'm doing another drawing of John Wick using my usual tools. I'm going to do a lot of work with these woodless charcoal pencils. The reason why I prefer them is because they can be sharpened really well. They hardly break at all. And in addition to that, I'm going to be using a whole bunch of blending and erasing tools as well. But because I can't do everything with charcoal pencils, or maybe I feel I can do certain things easier with some other types of pencils, I'm also going to be using a black art pencil and a graphite pencil where needed. Naturally, because I'm working with charcoal, things can get messy, so I'm going to put this piece of glassine paper under my hand. For softer blending and the background, I'm going to be using this piece of vine charcoal in combination with my blending tools. Let's start. I'm going to be using this graphite pencil. It's a 2H graphite pencil for both the sketching and a little bit of shading, light shading where needed. Because sometimes with charcoal it can be a little bit difficult for me to create these areas of lighter value because it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to control the amount of value with charcoal. Charcoal is better for a little bit darker tones. I started by using my pencils to draw his bangs and the top of his head and hair, but now I'm moving on to the background, which I'm mostly going to cover with vine charcoal. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did in many of my previous drawings. I'm going to use a combination of vine charcoal and compressed charcoal, because vine charcoal is a little bit lighter and I want to create some of these darker areas, so I'm going to put down a little bit of charcoal powder created from sharpening my woodless charcoal pencils to have some of these darker tones in the background. I don't have any specific shapes in the background, just a little bit of variation there. And now I'm moving on to drawing the eyebrows and the eyes using my woodless charcoal pencils. For the reflection in the eye, I reserved the white space. I didn't cover it with charcoal, and I'm going to try to keep it clean. And as long as I shade everything around it, even if I shade it very lightly, the reflections should stand out nicely and appear almost shiny. So because the light is hitting the left side of the face, we're gonna keep that area lighter and almost white. So the left side of the forehead and the nose is going to be a lot lighter. And the right side of the face will be a little bit darker. And there's going to be also some light coming from the other side as well. And when I say left side and right side, I mean from our perspective. So when I say left side, that's his right. That's going to be the lighter side of his face. So he has a whole bunch of these scars and scratches on his face. So I'm going to try to include that as well. Maybe that will look better in color, but charcoal has its advantages, and I'm going to try to use my range of value to make this portrait as realistic as possible. I don't know how much you can notice this, but I didn't use the same pencil for the eyes. I used two different pencils. Both of them are woodless charcoal pencils, but I used a medium one and a soft one. And the soft one is a little bit darker, and I used it for the darkest parts of the eye, the pupil. And now a part of the footage is probably going to appear a little bit blurry, or at least a little less sharp than the rest of it. That's because I had some problems transferring some parts of my footage, and I had to get creative to salvage it, and some of it came out in a little less quality format, but most of it is there. So it's going to refocus and get sharper soon enough. But in the meantime, you can see what I'm doing. I first shaded the forehead, and I left the upper part of the forehead lighter because of the light source, which is coming from above. It's not completely white, but it's a lot lighter than the rest of the forehead, obviously. Generally speaking, you should avoid leaving areas that are completely white, and you should reserve the white only for the lightest details of your portrait, like for example some reflections in the eyes, or maybe a few reflections on the skin here and there, but most of it should not be completely white. And I also want a little bit of texture on top of that as well. And speaking of that, to achieve that texture and to have a little more control over the shading, I'm also using a black colored pencil, as you can see here. The black colored pencil that I'm using is a Faber-Castell Polychromos black pencil, and like I said, I'm using it for a couple of reasons. First, because it allows me for more precision and control when shading. I can use it for my tapered stroke and cross-hatching, and I can use that technique not only to build up the value very gradually, but also to create a little bit of texture so that I can imitate the surface or the appearance of the skin. And you can see now that the quality of the footage is getting a little bit better, so that you can see more detail and more of that texture on the skin. I often talked about producing a variety of textures in your drawings, whether I was drawing landscapes or portraits. And one of the things that I often like to say is that you need to allow your pencils to work for you. So there's no need to put in hours and hours of work into drawing realistic skin. Your pencil, in combination with the grain of the paper, will produce a certain amount of texture that you can use to your advantage to create something that looks like a realistic skin. But even more important than these details, than these textures, is of course the shading and the range of value and the contrast in value between the larger areas of lighter and darker value on the face of the person that you're drawing. because ultimately it will be those larger relationships between those larger portions of lighter and darker value which will determine whether what you've drawn looks like a real person and whether it looks like the person that you were trying to draw. So this part here that I'm doing now took a little bit more time because I had to be patient and draw all of these hairs on his beard, and I had to layer it, occasionally soften it a little bit with a brush, but not too much, because I really want some of these hairs to be well defined, because his beard is not very thick in certain places, and I made some portions of it a little bit darker than others. I still have a little bit of work on it left, especially under the chin, but for now I decided to focus on blending the hair and adding a little bit more value to it, because I felt that it wasn't dark enough. And here, as you can see, I had to move on to drawing the rest of the background, and I used the same approach that I did with the left side of the drawing. Here I tried to pull some highlights in the hair to give it some depth and structure and make it a little bit more interesting. So that we can feel like some of these segments of hair are lying on top of the others. And now I'm just using a pencil eraser and a black colored pencil to refine some of the details and textures on the face and the scars, and to add some of these flyaway hairs, because his hair looks rather messy in this picture. And now I'm shading around the cheeks and the beard. For the darkest areas of the beard and the hair, naturally I use the soft charcoal pencil, because it's the darkest thing that I have. But the issue that I have with it sometimes is that the soft charcoal doesn't really stick to the surface. The best way to make it stick is to use your finger for blending. Other blending tools may push the charcoal into the paper, but they kind of move it around and make it a little bit lighter. So what you'll often see me doing is going over some of these areas over and over again, just to make sure that my darkest darks or darkest areas are dark enough. So I also did a little bit of shading on the face before I moved on to the clothes, because I felt like there wasn't enough contrast between the nose and the rest of the face. And now, as you can see, I'm just pretty much wrapping up the drawing and finishing the work on his clothes. I just need to make sure that I clean up some of these edges and that I shade everything to try to stay more or less consistent with my light sources, and pull a few highlights on the tie. And here it is. I think I'm pretty much done with the drawing here. I'm just going to use my black colored pencil to sign it, and the signature is going to be on the left side for a change. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you're a new subscriber, welcome. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do. I zoomed in a little bit here so that you can see more of the detail. Give me a like, comment, and check out my other videos. and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.